This episode is brought to you by our partner, Ice Barrel. Cold therapy was an integral part of my training. When I was a gymnast, I would be in that cold tub after every training session for a number of years, and it's still something I take part of as part of my recovery, my mental health, as well as my performance in and out of the gym. Please check out their FAQ page for everything you need to know about Ice Barrel and cold therapy. If you've never tried cold exposure before, we cannot recommend Ice Barrel enough. They have events all over the US, and we also introduced contrast therapy as an added session at our Power Monkey camp in 2022. It was a huge hit with our campers and coaches alike. We cannot wait to have them back again in 2023 for our 10-year anniversary. Please use Power Monkey, that's all caps, Power Monkey, no spaces, and save $75 off your Ice Barrel. Welcome to the Power Monkey podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Mike Service, and on today's episode, we have Adrian Bozman. It is the week of the 2023 CrossFit Games out in Madison, Wisconsin, and we are incredibly excited to have Boz on with us once again. We did have him on in the fall after the 2022 games, where he was programming for the first time, talking a little bit about those new skills, how he approached the games this year, a little bit more coy, obviously prior to the games, not wanting to give too much out in terms of what these athletes can anticipate. But we did talk about the new rounds of cuts that we're seeing that are a little bit more severe than we had in the past, as well as the reintroduction of Dave Castro into the mix and how they're working together to be able to bring some of the most complete tests to these incredible athletes. We are also excited to be able to announce that Boz will be with us for our 10-year anniversary camp, Camp 20 in the fall. He's going to be coming out for the entire week. We love having him out there with us. It's going to be exciting. We hope you guys enjoy this one and enjoy the week of the CrossFit Games.
Adrian, this is a big episode for me personally, because I get to start it. So I think we're live right now. So for all of our listeners, you can welcome Adrian the Bozman Boz onto the podcast. And the guys here, they think, I hope that they show that little wave on our on our clip. The guys here are either envious or jealous or impartial to what I've labeled a slight bromance that we had in Berlin recently. So Dave allowed me to kind of bring the episode in. And I was telling them that we had quite a nice time wandering around the streets of Berlin. And me as your tour guide, for some reason, even though I think you'd probably been in Berlin more than me, but me being the German resident right now, it seemed appropriate.
We'll always have Berlin, Mike.
We will.
Yeah, no, that was great. It was really fun. That was for the semifinal event that we had earlier in the year. And yeah, we got in a little early, had a day. So Mike was gracious enough to come up and take the train into town and hang out. And it was great. It was a great day. It was one of the best like jet lag days that I've had. So yeah,
that makes me happy.
Berlin. Wait, so are we legit live?
We're live.
Oh, we're live.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We're on. So be careful. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't say anything you want to take back.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably sum up that day as like steps, shakshuka, and bro hugs.
Coffee. A lot of coffee.
And a lot of coffee. Yeah, a lot of coffee, which I think everybody that knows me within our Power Monkey family knows that I love coffee. And I'm very excited when somebody comes to visit me anywhere, or I can go visit them and we can share a nice cup, which we shared a few.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. Actually, I ended that day by renting a bike from the hotel and riding to a local affiliate in the evening. And it was great. I rode that bike for the rest of the time that I was there. And it was very kind of Berlin in the sense that it was like there were rules, but it was laid back. I think that's a good way to describe Berlin. Like I went to try to pay for this bike, and the hotel kind of has a joint deal with the bike kiosk. And the gentleman that was running the bike kiosk wasn't there. So the hotel concierge said that he would take my money. I said, great. So I gave him, 15 € or whatever. It was supposed to be for a day, but every time I went back to try to return the bike, the guy that ran the kiosk was never there. So I could never return it. And so it turned into like a week of me having this bike. And then same thing when I left, he wasn't there. So I just put the key on the front desk and left. And
just took the bike home with me. It's just the only logical thing.
No, the bike was returned, but I did not pay full price for the time that I had the bike because I couldn't. There was nobody there to take my money.
You're going to be
Very
a
kind Germans.
wanted man in Berlin, Boz.
I'll take that risk. It was
So I
worth
just
it.
want to jump in real quick on the semi side of things. Sounds like it was a lovely weekend that you guys had together. But semis, obviously, this podcast is going to come out right in the heart of everyone kind of heading to Madison. But were there any athletes that showed up, whether it be Berlin or any of the other semis that you went to, that surprised you and were like, oh shit, this person is going to be fun to watch come Madison after being in Berlin or any other semis?
It's funny. I got asked that a lot. Like, was there any surprises at semis? And the short answer is no. I mean, I expect the athletes are going to show up and do what they do, which is be awesome. And they did. So that was cool. But yeah, I think one guy that surprised a lot of people because he just wasn't on their radar was Victor Hoffer from France. He's on a lot of people's radar now, including mine. I didn't really know who he was. And he absolutely smashed some of the stuff that was happening at semis. Turns out he was on the French national team for gymnastics, and he's high level athlete. And he didn't qualify for the games, unfortunately. I think he missed it by 2 spots, but we got him on the demo team this year, so I'm really excited that we get to pull him out and have him a part of it in that way at least. So that was a really cool one. Yeah.
Wait. I don't want, before we move on from that one, anytime we talk about national team gymnasts, we got to expand, especially on the men's side. That doesn't happen too often. We see the females coming from gymnastics backgrounds all the time. Strength, height, weight ratio all kind of works out well for them to be kind of the right body type to excel in CrossFit. We don't see that too much on the gymnastics side with men's gymnastics. Do you think that it's possible for a men's gymnast to actually excel at the highest level within CrossFit, or you think that's kind of an anomaly?
That's a great question. I don't know. Well, I mean, I feel like you'd be a better person to answer that, but
I would say no, but I mean,
yeah, I like at first blush, I would probably say no as well. I think that you're really behind in kind of the barbell strength, and I think that's really tough to catch up on. But I mean, Pat Vellner has a background in gymnastics. I don't know how high level he was or what his ultimate kind of competition level was, but he's an example. Obviously, his CrossFit career has been incredible. We'll see what happens with Victor. I mean, he's young. I think he's like 21, 20, something like that. So he's got a lot of time to develop and continue to get better. So, the fact that he's already coming out swinging, I think he's got a lot of potential. But yeah, he may be the outlier. The other thing I wonder too is just like, when you have athletes that are so invested in other sports at that level, what is their desire to switch and do that again? I mean, how much it takes out of you to compete at that level, physically, emotionally. Like, you really can't have room for much else. And to do that and have a career basically at that for however long it takes, 5, 10 more years, to sign up for that again, I think is pretty daunting for a lot of people. So I think there's probably like a self-selection where people just opt out after having a successful career like that probably influences it as well, even if they would have been, capable and had the potential. So I don't know.
I just have to take a pause and just say, usually, Adrian, you're already on the podcast. So, at the end, we have you choose your favorite sport, which is predominantly always weightlifting amongst our guests.
Really?
And I think what Adrian just said is that usually the weightlifters are the ones that excel in the domain
I didn't hear
of
that
CrossFit.
at all. In fact, weightlifting wasn't even brought up in that conversation at all.
And then,
so
I mean, it does make sense. I mean, we have Matt Frazier, former weightlifter turned best CrossFitter ever. So I just wanted to,
but I think he's the outlier
tally list. Yes.
Maybe
yeah.
We'll
and
see
actually,
Victor be best ever in a couple of years.
So that would be really cool. We need that to even it out. And you made a pretty good point, just like on the side of, at least for me, I'm always impressed when I see one of the games athletes that also had a relatively high level sporting career in another discipline, because when I was done weightlifting, there's no way you could sign me up to like invest in another 5+ years of like high level training and sport. So maybe it's a little bit unplanned happenstance where they just kind of fall into the rhythm and get really good, and then that's enticing. But yeah, that's interesting to think about. And from Dave's side of the sport pond, to see a really high level gymnast start to move up the ranks will be fun to observe.
Well, Mike, go ahead, boss.
Well, I was going to say, maybe pitch it back to you a little bit there, Dave. Like, do you think the age has something to do with it as well, with women's gymnastics being such a younger sport? I mean, not in the sense that it's younger competitively, but most female gymnasts have a shorter career by the time that they're in their early 20s. It's like, it's done, whereas men's gymnastics, you get a little bit longer runway for that. And in many cases, you have to be a little bit older to be at that top level. Do you think that has anything to do with it?
I don't. I mean, I think it more has to do with body type and, real capabilities. You're going to get an outlier every now and then. You'll get a Vellner, you get a Cody Anderson, you get some like Alex Smith, who has some ability to kind of make up for what's lacking in most gymnasts. But most of the people that we're seeing coming out don't have high level gymnastics backgrounds, meaning they're not going into their late 20s competing. They are finishing their careers in their teens, maybe the end of high school. Maybe they do a club year at a university somewhere, but it's not like they're going to mid 20s, late 20s, having a full gymnastics career before transitioning. So they end up, doing finding CrossFit are relatively around the same time that a female gymnast would. So for me, the age thing is less of a factor.
Yeah, man, you just reminded me. Shout out Cody Anderson. That guy's an amazing athlete. I love that guy. I haven't seen him in a long time, but he is just such a sweet guy and incredible athlete. And I lurk on his Instagram every once in a while. I cannot believe how strong he is now.
He's a crazy weightlifter too. Yeah, he got like into a point where he was lifting. He was one of, I would say, like one of the few top CrossFitters that would have been able to, like a male CrossFitter could like hold his own in weightlifting because of his body weight and his size. Like he could have went and been like competitive at a national level, like a high national level in weightlifting too, which good shout out there.
I'll always remember there was, I think it was 2017 or 18, one of the early Madison years, where there was a clean speed ladder and Cody beat Cole Sager head to head on the last couple bars. And it was the craziest thing to see because you've got Cody, who's not a big guy by any stretch. And at that point, I think he was even, more slight than he is now. And Cole Sager is a pretty stout dude. You size him up, you're like, yeah, this guy can move some weight. And they both got to the last bar and Cole failed it. Cody hit it and moved on. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was such a crazy moment. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Cody is going to come back up at the end of this podcast. Believe it or not, we have another little tidbit that we want to throw at you, but games time. I'm sure you've been talking about this quite a bit, but first thing we wanted to check in on is some delineation of roles between you and this is more for just some clarity for us and maybe for some listeners out there that are still a little bit unsure as to how the bringing up of Castro has worked in terms of how you prepped for last year's games versus how you prepped for this year's games, and especially with him coming in maybe a little bit into the process where you've had some things already kind of in your head. How are the roles kind of delineated in terms of what his official role is versus yours?
Yeah, I mean, it's still, if I'm perfectly honest about it, still early days. Dave's obviously coming in as the acting GM of the department, which is great. I've worked with Dave, man, since 2007 on the seminar team and since 2008 for the games. So he and I work really well together. The timing of having him come in, most of the games planning was fairly set. And so it was really just trying to get him up to speed in a lot of ways. And then obviously he's going to want to have some input, which is great. No one more experienced. So it was nice to be able to have that soundboard again to bounce things off of. And from that, some things certainly changed as far as our original plan, but I think for the better. The more that you can kind of have that, what's the word? It's like, you want people around you that you're able to bounce things off of honestly, and they're going to tell you, it's not just going to be like a kind of fluff you up type of thing. I think that's how you get to the best outcome in so many areas in life. So it was good to have that influence, even if the timing made it a little difficult just because we're so far in. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And with regards to that, one of the things that did come up that, is new for this year, did not happen last year, the cut situation. And we're kind of curious if that was intended or was that a Castro addition that you weren't intending to have to deal with?
Well, I mean, we did have cuts last year. So last year we did cut from Saturday to Sunday. We cut 10 athletes. So this year it's just a little bit more aggressive, cutting on Friday night and then again on Saturday night. And again, that was, a decision that we were planning to mirror the same cut schedule. And then, looking at it, the games is a big beast and you've got to take a lot of things into consideration, as far as logistics and manpower and how it's going to influence the competition. And so when we started looking at all of those factors, then the joint decision was made that we need to make that cut schedule.
So I have a question about one of the events that was partially announced. The Venn diagram that you guys have been putting up, showing obviously 3 of the important pillars. The endurance side has been announced. Are going to be doing some version of a 5K run. The weightlifting are doing a total. The gymnastics side has not been announced yet fully. It just said some kind of skills combination of some kind. Curious, one, is there intention to release the third portion of that before the games? Is that going to be a surprise moment?
Well, this year we've got a ton of stuff that's been released. We're going to continue to release some things early, but it's not the games until we have some things that the athletes aren't going to learn until they're almost right there. So, we have a choice to make there at every step along the way. And we're holding that one a little closer to the chest. So they'll learn that one a little closer to comp time.
Got it.
I'll definitely say, as the the weightlifter in the room, I'm pretty excited to see the snatch and clean and jerk and what totals some people can put up. From getting to see a lot of the athletes snatch at regionals, and then when I was there, I'm not remembering, but if you can remind me, Boz, has there been a games where they've had to do a heavy snatch and clean and jerk?
Not in a back-to-back fashion like that, like straight up total. No. So there's definitely been like ladders of each, both of those movements have been explored a lot in different ways, but I might be misremembering, but to my memory, no, they haven't been done back-to-back like that in like I won't say true total, because it's not going to mirror like a true weightlifting meet that takes,
right.
I mean, you guys know, like a full weightlifting meet that's a day commitment, and we just have other things that we have to do on the schedule. So it's not going to be exactly like a purist weightlifting style event, but they will do a snatch and a clean and jerk, and they will total them together, and we'll see who comes out on top.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think it's interesting, especially from some of the athletes that I get to help. I think they're always guessing maybe which one they'll have to train for. And I could imagine for a lot of the athletes after regionals, they're like, all right, snatch is done. Like, we tested that. And then getting that announcement, a week or so ago, like, oh man, we haven't been snatching since before regionals, and then having to kind of ramp that back up. So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I got a question for you. It's funny. I try not to make a habit of it, but sometimes I'll catch myself, reading through the comments, and for better or worse. One of the comments that I saw kind of recurring was people wanting to see like a press out rule applied in a CrossFit setting. And I thought that was interesting, because I've talked to so many weightlifters that are like, God, I hate this.
Weightlifters hate the press out.
That's rule. What I'm saying. Yeah. I talked to a lot of weightlifters that are like, man, this is an artifice of like some bygone era. Nobody likes it anymore. So just curious as to your thoughts there.
I guess it's all, you can't make something black or white. There's always, outlier there, but speaking as someone who missed out on a medal at national championships because I got called for a press out on 2 reds to a white, like, I hate that rule. Especially because in general, like, for safety, I understand, like, there's times where people are trying to press out a weight that they just don't have any business lifting, and then you get an injury. But pressing something out is more difficult than having a clean lockout. So like, there were times where somebody would press a weight out and get turned down, and I would be more impressed with that than the lift that I had made. Like, wow, I couldn't do that if I tried. So I think there's already enough controversy with what happens, and like judging and different things like that. I think the last thing that CrossFit would want to do is then have a subjective moment of, was that a press out or was that not a press out? Because there's full on brawls at like world level competitions when somebody gets called for a press out, and you get the wrong judge that just sees something a little bit weird and calls it press out on somebody that thinks they just won the event, or then misses it on another one. Like I would never enter that into competition and open that can of worms.
Yeah. So for you, it's personal too.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and it's funny. It's so funny. Like my coach, he almost made fun of me when it happened, because he's like, you've never pressed anything out in your life. You're not strong enough to. And then the one time you do, it's to medal. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. And wait, did you actually press out, Mike, or was it a bad call?
No. I got called for a press out. It was not a press out. Like,
it was not a press out.
No. So the rule on the press out is like it can't, like, you can't see like that it's happening. And mine was that my shoulders looked a little bit soft when I locked out, and it was whatever. It was what it was called. So that was it. But I slept with it after it happened.
Yeah, not salty at all. 10 years later.
Not at all. Yeah, no, that was I can remember exact moment and who the judge was and how frustrated I was with them.
I do find things like that interesting. Obviously being a part of CrossFit as a competitive activity for so long, and having to codify these movements in a way that they can be contested, and oftentimes with like many reps and not a lot of time to make those decisions. I think, people kind of sidestep how difficult that can be on the judge. But it does kind of interest me how these rules come to be, because those are decisions that we have to make every year about, okay, like, what do we include to make this simple for the athletes, but at the same time objective, so they can't try to, skirt the line. So the press out rule to me is interesting, because I've heard that cited before about, oh, it's for the safety of the athlete. But I don't know if I believe that in a weightlifting context. You know what I mean? Like I get like you can't re-rack it and reattempt a jerk, something like that. That to me seems like an obvious safety thing. You don't want somebody incentivized to try to re-rack a lift that they obviously don't have. But man, the press out to me, I just never got that that's going to increase safety significantly. So
I think it's kind of like generational dogma passed down, because like when they removed the strict press, it was because it got too hard to judge, because they were doing like a lean back, like kipping press movement that wasn't really a strict press, but it wasn't a push press, and that was getting really sketchy. And I think it just turned into, they said like, yeah, we're taking the press out because it's too hard to judge and it's getting dangerous with how they're moving the barbell. And I think probably that just stuck, and then that was something that was planted in my head from the time I was 10 or 11, and they'd say like, yeah, you don't press it out because you get hurt. So either lock it out and don't have any question, or be done. But I mean, to be honest though, probably two of the nastiest injuries I saw were from a lifter who was like mostly locked out and then thought he could press it out. And like, if you've ever seen somebody's elbow explode, like that was one time during a press out, and there's been a couple other like weird-ish sketchy ones. So I guess it depends on what you've seen, and then how you apply that to the rule.
Oh, Boz, I want to touch on this idea of judging a little bit. You seem to be a fan, especially coming off of our last episode, you talking about just watching so many different sports growing up, and being a fan of a variety of different things. We're seeing a lot of now in a ton of different sports, whether it be baseball with the strike zone, the virtual strike zone, or soccer using some form of camera system to see whether or not the ball goes fully over the line for goals, or something a little bit more aggressive in other sports, the eagle eye in tennis, that kind of stuff, taking some of the human error out of the equation. Do you envision ever a possibility of using some kind of digital judging system for CrossFit virtual events or in person, to potentially limit or negate some of the human error that happens with some of these things?
I would say, never say never. Like, I can't predict the future any better than anybody else. I haven't seen a reliable enough technology yet that would, put the confidence in me that it would be any better than the situation that we have now. It's not to say it couldn't get there, but we've had various people kind of give some presentations on what could be if we were to adopt their technology. And it's always like, okay, cool, but this is a pretty big leap of faith. And so I'm not convinced that it's there yet. Not to say that it couldn't be. I also think that there's like this weird false equivalency that happens between CrossFit as a contested sport and other sports. So, you mentioned the replay and strike zone in baseball and, eye in the sky tennis, all that kind of stuff. That's great. But usually we're talking about a single call that's contested and then reviewed using that system. We already do that, so we have, a lot of people don't know this, but it's been common practice at the games and any sort of qualifying live event that we run since like 2012, where we have a dedicated closed circuit camera on our primary fields of play. And so for significant appeals and things like that, we have that available. We use that constantly to review. But what we don't want to do, and what I think athletes say that they want sometimes, but I don't think they do if they think it all the way through. Sometimes they say that they would want like full replay of the whole thing. It's like, man, if you think about that and you think about the door that potentially opens for an event, let's say you have a chipper event with, a couple hundred repetitions in it, and you're asking that full review is available for every athlete in every lane for every rep, it's going to take you 10 days to sift through the results. And the competition is just killed in that sense. The interest in the sport would, in my opinion, decline radically because it would become unwatchable. And so I think sometimes people look at things through this purist lens of, well, this would be objectively the most fair thing to do. And you're like, yes, it would also render it totally uninteresting, totally unwatchable, totally unappealable to most people. And I think it would be a bad outcome, even if you might catch the couple of calls that were either missed or made in poor judgment. So I think people have to take a more holistic approach to things and think about the outcomes, not what they intend to happen, before they make kind of sweeping suggestions like that, And I get it. Like, I think we're lucky that we have, look, CrossFitters are super passionate, and we hear about it when we misstep or when we do things that they think could be done differently. Like, hey man, they're the first to let us know, sometimes less graciously than others. And that's fine. I would rather have that passionate group than like an indifferent, apathetic group, but I think sometimes just thinking it all the way through is a harder task. And frankly, I guess it's not the job of the average spectator. That's our job, right? And then it's our job to say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea, and this is why. Yeah.
No, I love that answer, and I appreciate going in depth in some of that stuff. And we've had a similar issue in gymnastics forever too, where you have the subjective coach judge in the stands, maybe for a particular country that has some athlete out there that they want to see do well, and there's been a push from a few different companies to put together a virtual judging system for gymnastics as well, and to understand the complexity that goes along with angles and different skills, and did this person complete this correctly. It's very different, as you said, than just did a ball go over a line. And so I understand kind of the complexity you guys are talking about here, and rendering it uninteresting is such a critical component. You're absolutely right. And, people need to watch, people need to be engaged, people need to want to be interested in what's going on. I did a High Rocks event earlier this year, and the judging was just laughable. Like, I mean, there's like one judge per one of the 10 stations. And who knows if they were watching everybody accurately. But to be honest, it didn't really matter. People were still having fun. The spectators were still loving it. People still love seeing their score up on the screen. And so there is this delicate balance of, yes, how we have to get it as close to perfect as possible, but still keep it entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess the other thing about adopting any new technology is like, it's not going to be great V1, no matter what it is or how good it is. And so, if people expect a certain standard of officiating, you adopt that new technology, chances are there's going to be a drop before it gets better. And so even at the outset, what somebody might see as a great idea, you're going to have the guts to see it through for a couple of seasons until it can actually develop into something that it could be, and not have that knee jerk of, well, we adopted it and it was an abject failure. It's like, no, it didn't have time to do what it was supposed to do. Especially with something that's like an emerging technology. That's just, you have to expect that if you're going to do that, there's going to be a transition period. And that transition period may be less than, from a qualitative standpoint, than where you were before.
Without a doubt.
And a lot of people aren't willing to think about that or consider that.
So I did see some announcements from Fikowski recently about some of the advancements that the PFA are making with regards to being able to communicate with you guys and get some of the athletes concerned listened to, and maybe not everything complied with, but it's great to see that the athletes now have a little bit of a voice in there too, to be able to say, hey, these are things that we notice as competitors out on the floor, and you guys are doing the job that you can to give them the ability to have as level of a playing field as possible. That's cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as the sport continues to evolve and grow, like, of course, we want to listen to the athletes and make sure that they have a voice in the room. Again, just kind of going back to the thrust of this whole conversation, they're not always going to have full information to make decisions from. And so sometimes what they bring to the table, of course, we're going to consider, but based on what we know and what we have to work with logistically and otherwise, or what we've done in the past that they may not be privy to. We may not always adopt their recommendations or their requests, but that's not to say that it's not great to have their input.
Yep. So along with this idea of, what's going on, and you being kind of leading the charge when it comes to next week's competition, last time we spoke, it was just coming off of the 2022 games. And one of the things that you had brought up is that it's not enough to train towards a specific standard that you think will show up. And it's something we kind of dove pretty deeply into. It's something we're really passionate about, not training towards a standard, but training towards proper movement quality and then applying that to the standard. Is there a message that you've kind of put together for this year's games that you think when it's all said and done that you're going to be able to sit back and say, okay, this was kind of the intention behind this year's games? Or is that just a hallmark of the way that you put things together?
I mean, there is, but I think we have to leave that conversation until post games because there's so much that hasn't been revealed yet. I think that anything I say is going to put somebody who's listening to this at a, maybe not an advantage truly, but maybe in a different headspace than somebody who doesn't. So out of fairness to the athletes, I think I got to punt that until post games, but I'd be happy to come back and chat about that afterwards.
I like that. That's like a quote to be determined once we see the final event and final results.
And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts after seeing it all unfold. Like, what are the themes that come out in your mind? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Can't wait.
Dave? So I love the fact that you have that underlining thing that you're trying to share when you're programming for the games. When you do that, is the message that you're generally trying to share one of, trying to poke holes or like expose people? Or is it just like, hey, this is something I don't think people are really paying attention to that I want them to be paying more attention to?
I mean, I guess one kind of follows the other. Right. Like if you think there's something valuable that people have kind of lost sight of, I think necessarily that will expose the people that haven't been doing that thing. But like I'm not like a combative person particularly. I'm not out to like get anybody. I don't think that that's really the nature of the best CrossFit Games experience. Even if it does play out that way sometimes when you have an athlete that gets there and gets confronted with a weakness. So no, I don't think I'm out to poke holes in anybody's game, but I do think it's important that there's a holistic approach. And again, I think to kind of pick up the thrust of the conversation we left off last year, it's like, hey, there's plenty of things to be gained by approaching things in different ways, even if you don't expect them to show up in competition that way. And to me, that's really the thing that kind of has been lost over the years. People are starting to specialize in CrossFit in the way that they think it's going to be contested. And by that same kind of logic, they're missing out on some of the physiological benefits that they could be deriving otherwise. And that's the real shame. You know what I mean? So it's funny because I think some people took last year and they took some of the things that were difficult or different, and they just started training exclusively those things. And I'm like, dude, you're still missing the point. That's the point is not to just get good at this one thing that was contested last year. The point is that there's a range of experience that you should be comfortable with, and it doesn't matter how it shows up in competition. And you should see value in it in your training because it'll help to push out the margins further. And that's a different mindset. You know what I mean? It's more of the same to just say, oh, we're doing handstands against the wall with the chest now. That's all I do. It's like, well, you're still missing the point,
I like I think that's the right word, the T you said, Boz, is mindset, because when people have an expectation and then something different comes, they're very frustrated or disappointed, or I guess they're salty. But if your expectation is I'm coming in to be challenged, then great. Challenge me, and then that's it. Like you said, a CrossFitter is not a specialist. So like if Dave showed up to a gymnastics competition, they asked him to do something that was not within his disciplines, he can be angry because the expectation is that's what he should be good at. If I go somewhere and all of a sudden they're like, actually you're not gonna snatch or clean and jerk, you're gonna do a kettlebell long cycle, it's like I could be frustrated. But if you're competing at the highest level of CrossFit, it doesn't matter if you're asked to do hopscotch or run a 10K or do a backstroke 100-meter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're being challenged to be the epitome of like fitness and diversity within fitness. And I, even though I'm a specialist, I like that because it takes out the opportunity for anybody to be basically, for lack of a better word, like pissy about what the events are chosen as, because like you signed up for it.
Do
like
you see how many athletes we had on post games that were pissy about the new events? Let's go back, and there were quite a few that were rather upset.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, I get that, but I also agree with you, Mike, that I think the best have that mindset of I want to engage with this thing that will stretch me. And you see that not only in the way that they train and compete, but also in their attitude towards their competitors. Like you see the top of the heap, or the people that have the potential to be the top of the heap. They're not excited that Tia Claire is not competing this year. They're like, man, I don't get to test myself against the best now. Mm-hmm. That's a different animal than somebody that's just opportunistically looking for like, oh, now's my window. It's like that mindset has an inherent weakness in it. And when you're confronted with something truly either a little bit beyond your level, or somebody who's truly, out of reach for you at this time, how do you react if that's your mindset? It's going to be a tough road. So I think the best that still
Jocko mentality of just whatever comes up, good.
Sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Whatever it is, I got this.
I don't know. Hey, Jordan, you might know. Do you know Gary Tonin?
I do.
Yeah. So, he, forget, it might have been Dan Hooker, a UFC fighter, who had an interview recently. And he talked about all fighters are like a little bit delusional, because you have to believe 100% that you can beat the person in front of you. Like, I'm paraphrasing his interview. Gary Tonin was talking about this too, where it's like, this guy might be objectively better than me, but the mindset that's going to serve me when I'm in competition against him, there cannot be room for that. It has to be like, I am going to take it to this person. I'm going to win. I'm going to come out on top. Even if that's not true deep down somewhere, it serves you nothing to have that in the back of your mind competitively. You have to believe that you're going to be the one.
I believe that 100%. 100%.
Right?
Early on in my career, I was not able to do that as an athlete. And I really like this conversation because it was something that I learned later on in my career after watching one of my idols in the sport compete. Blaine Wilson was one of my idols growing up, and I was lucky enough to become really close with him towards the end of my career. He was, or early on in my career, it's kind of towards the end of his. And Blaine, 3-time Olympian, one of the most decorated male gymnasts of all time, Ohio State icon. He would go into competition and knew he was going to win. The confidence level that he had going in was palpable. Like, you could just see, and whether or not he was, able to win all this did not matter. It was this level of confidence that everyone took as cockiness. In fact, for years, everyone would just think that he was the cockiest guy out there because of the way that he acted. And I always wanted a little bit of that because everyone was a little bit scared to compete against Blaine. Everyone was a little bit, oh, shit, if Blaine's here, we're all vying for second place. And it was more because he won walking out on the floor. He won the competition before it started because of everyone saw his attitude. And I wanted just a little piece of that because I never had that ability. And speaking with him and just saying, like, it doesn't come from, anything, you're not wanting the other guys to do bad or anything like that. You just have a confidence in you that says, I'm going to win this thing. I have everything. I have every tool in the book to be able to go out there on the floor and win. And it took me, unfortunately, later in my career to recognize the benefits of that. But I think you're exactly right, Boz. Like, whether or not you have the tools, you still have to believe before you get in there. Otherwise, there's nothing that's going to come out of it that's good. So
I'm enjoying this. It's like life lessons, and I'm I'm putting a spin on it in when I'm listening. Of course, I'm listening, but then I'm also thinking. So apologies for that. It's hard to separate those two.
Well, I was just going to say that I still think you see that at the games level more often than not in the competitors. Most of them, when they're there, they are hungry for that challenge put in front of them. I think sometimes that attitude can become filtered with what happens at the end of the day after the results. So you speak to them afterwards. I think their perspective can change based on what they hoped would have happened, or, maybe they had a misstep in competition in their execution. There's plenty of other filters that can get put on somebody's perspective after the fact. You know what I mean? But when we're there and they're lining up in the corrals, they're about to take the field. I mean, you see it, they're ready to run over anything in their way. Like that's more common than it is not.
Yeah, they got a special mentality. I mean, most of the people that are at that level,
yeah.
they have it in them. It's built into their DNA. I'm gonna play a little game with you if you're up for it. And
yeah,
there may be some questions in here that you can't answer and just skip over, which is totally fine. But I want to play. Do you think we'll ever see? And has to do with
hopscotch is out.
Hopscotch is out.
Okay, I was starting there, but I was pretty confident.
With gymnastics movements specifically. And some of these came up recently and in some social media feeds and things like that. And just want to get your thoughts on whether or not there's value in moving in some more aggressive gymnastics specific movements. First one.
Well, I might have to cut you off there because I do think there is a lot of value in that.
Okay.
I think we have to save this until afterwards because I don't want to let anything, you know what I mean? I just don't want there to be any sort of controversy.
Just one that I don't think will be in there. Bringing back the Cody Anderson conversation, he put up some circles on a stack of plates the other day, and circles, for those of you who don't know, a palm horse event in gymnastics. They're done on floor, they're done on parallel bar sometimes, but it's basically just creating kind of like a circling action, 360-degree rotation around using your hands to keep your feet off the ground. And we actually used to do them as part of the CrossFit Level 2 advanced course that I put together years ago. We used to have mushrooms as part of the course. We required parallel bars at the gyms, and to see Cody put together some circles on some plates, it was very cool to see. I'm just curious from your perspective, do you ever do those kinds of skill specific things in your own training, and whether or not, circus tricks at that level are interesting enough to be able to test an athlete with?
I mean, on a personal level, like I'm a dabbler. I always like to dabble with things. I hope I always will. I think that's kind of what keeps it fresh, from just like a physicality standpoint. As far as like a contested movement, never say never, but that one I can say with confidence, no, you're not going to see circles in the 2023 CrossFit Games. But I love the way that he set that up. It was one of those like, oh, duh kind of things, like he had set up a stack of plates. He can obviously set that higher or lower depending on your skill level. And when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, that's such a no-brainer way to train this. But of course, I'd never thought to do that. It was very cool. But yeah, it is kind of interesting though. If you go back in the old CrossFit Journal articles, you see all sorts of that stuff. Again, that they're kind of touching and playing with, not on like a super technical level, but just to get your hands dirty with it. And you'd see like, the bucket on the string. You'd see that as a training device in the old CrossFit Santa Cruz gym. I think there's a lot of utility in playing around with that. Even if you never master that particular skill, I think the exposure to different things like that goes a long way with your coordination generally. And that's valuable and not easy to train with something that you're doing all the time. Like doing another 100 thrusters is not going to push the envelope for the average CrossFitter that way.
I just want to wait before you jump in, Mike. I just want to give a shout out to Pope. Dan Pope, who's one of our PTs for Power Monkey Camp at Champion Clinic out in Boston. An incredible athlete in his own right. He was a strong man. He made it to regionals back in the day. And for years at Power Monkey Camp, when he would come back, he would try to learn another low level kids gymnastics routine. And so he learned the level 8, or excuse me, level like 4 or 5, which are like, 7, 8-year-olds in gymnastics, the way the levels work, their mushroom routine. And he learned their floor routine, and he learned their parallel bar routine. And he learned these kids, 7 and 8-year-olds. And we were always trying to go to him and be like, Dan, I know you're 30 years old, but we need you to join, enter into a competition and go and compete against these 7-year-olds. It would be just epic to watch this 30-year-old go in and just do a level 4 pommel horse routine.
Dude, it's the old Kramer doing
karate
lessons from
yeah.
Seinfeld.
We're all the same level.
we're equal skill level.
It's one of my favorite episodes where Kramer's just beating up on these 10-year-olds because his sensei said they were the same level. Same exact thing. I love it.
Yep.
All right,
well, maybe we can get Boz when he comes out to camp to learn the Will Ferrell rhythmic gymnastics ribbon routine as a new skill that you could dabble in.
So this is where I was going. So this is where I was going with my follow-up for you, Adrian. And there's no out of bounds on this one, so you can be fully candid. Last camp that you were at, you weren't able to stay the whole time, and we're really excited to see if you're going to participate in the handstand walk race relay that has become one of the high points of camp. So Thursdays, in very true, like, I guess, orthodox CrossFit standards, like Thursdays have turned into the like try new things, test yourself, and compete and whatever level you're able. So like Thursdays, it looks like a very, very random variation or version of an adult circus school where people are trying stuff on P-bars, rings, people are trying to learn a back tuck, a front flip, and then the culmination of all of these skills and very little weightlifting. And most of the weightlifters or weightlifting specific people end up over on the floor anyways, wanting to try all these different things. Are that we get Dave and then one of the other managers at camp, her name's Osh, and she was a gymnast at Kentucky. They're the two team captains, and we have what has turned into a massive relay race where it's like 2 teams of 20 to 30 participants that are just relay racing on their hands, and gets pretty competitive. And I feel like this is something that you would really thrive in and have fun.
I mean, the second part of that statement is true. I'd have fun. I don't know about thrive anymore. I think I get a lot more credit than I'm due. I'm a total hack these days. You know what I mean? Like I was never that great to begin with. And then it's been 20 years since I've really done acrobatics. So my skill set is very, very diminished at this point, but I'm absolutely game for that. And I will say that, yeah, my wife and I are planning to come in September. So yeah.
Is she able or willing inverted walker?
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for her at this point.
Well, I feel like we could maybe, Dave's wife, Sadie, is the brave one of the two. And she has never participated to this point in the handstand relay.
She did it last camp.
Did she do it last camp?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. She did.
She wasn't proud of her performance.
Yeah. So she recently got started on. I mean, it's kind of funny. She's on our team, and we have a handstand walk program in our app. So she's started that journey. So maybe if your wife is game, she could hop in there too, and then
I'll float it by her, but no promises on that one.
that would be amazing. And then to that, since we're going to have a follow-up post games to, go over the hits and misses of Madison 2023. And maybe we can give you some mulligans if there are any workouts that are, contested or people are frustrated with. We could do an upgraded version at our end of camp competition. So, if it is that hopscotch was really like the one that you wanted to add in, but I blew it in this conversation, we could definitely put something like that into our end of the week comp if you're able to help us program that.
I mean, hey, let's talk. It's hopscotch 2023,
Well, we're loving the idea of you being able to come back out to camp with us. You had a short stint last year and came for a couple of days.
Yeah, way too short.
Any stations that you are excited to potentially jump in and learn from or redo if you did one that you want to get more information out of?
I will say that one of the best parts about the short stint that I did get to experience last year was just being, kind of revisiting things that I hadn't thought about in years in some cases. Like I've been doing CrossFit for a long time, and I think that breeds a certain familiarity with most things. But you forget what you already knew or what you haven't thought about in a long time. Your technique creeps. I mean, man, I just learned a ton of details from the basic weightlifting station that we did, like just revisiting some things that I'm like, oh man, I knew that, but I haven't thought about that in 5-6 years, At the rowing station was a really great example of that. It's like, oh yeah, I totally forgot the nuances of this whole stroke, just tons of little things like that to me were really eye-opening for I won't say like old and jaded like me, because I'm not either of those things, I hope, but I think it's just easy to kind of go on autopilot with some things and then kind of fall back in love with like, oh yeah, there's some really cool details here that you can focus on. That to me, more than anything else, was like the most profound part of it.
I think it's always a refreshing reminder at camp. It's like the continuing education side of things. Like for us, it's built into our calendar. Like we get to do it 2 times per year, and all of our coaches have a few stations where they're off, and they're usually jumping into one of the other coaches' stations and trying to just, touch up on something that they haven't really spent much time on. But it's nice to hear from your side of things, because it definitely echoes what we hear from a lot of the people that will come that have been in the CrossFit community for a long time. Yep. And sometimes, especially with me in the weightlifting side, I'm not always showing them something new. I'm like reminding them of something that they were actually exposed to a long time ago, or painting a little bit different perspective of something that maybe they haven't visited in quite a while.
Yeah, I also think it is super healthy, like if you go through the world as kind of a fitness professional, like sooner or later you have to put the expert hat on. And I think the danger in putting the expert hat on is that you're like, well, if I show that I don't have this skill set or I don't understand it completely, that somehow denigrates my ability to teach it or to instruct or coach or whatever. But that's the wrong attitude to adopt, right? Like you have to continue to try to refine things. And so just having a place that you're kind of permission to do that, where it's like, yeah, you're going to jump in, and it doesn't matter if you're top dog in your gym or, you're the head coach at such and such facility. Okay, cool. You're still going to do the same thing as everybody else. And you're going to, by extension, take so much away from that. I think that's so healthy, just to have a space to do that. Because I think a lot of people do convince themselves at a certain point. I know I certainly have it at times in my kind of career, if you want to call it that, where it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be the expert. I can't show that I don't know this or that I haven't been exposed to this thing. And that sucks, because it just limits you, right? And then by extension, it limits the people that you're working with. And that's no good for anybody. So
yeah, the I don't know is so powerful. I don't know the answer to that. You know what I mean? And there's probably someone who can help answer that a little bit better. And I find myself, doing my best to do that as well, because I know that, I think of myself as a pretty good handstand coach and instructor, and actively participating, trying to get better at it. But I know that there are people out there that know some things that I don't. And so like I'll direct people to people like Yuval, who we've had on the podcast before, who's a close friend and incredible teacher, or, Mike is working with another handstand performer that's fantastic, Chris Gotti, who is a gymnast transitioning handstand. And I love the idea of being able to be collaborative. And also I love the idea of picking up nuance and details around particular movements. And I think that's one of the things that you get from someone who has spent their lives on what it's like to figure out what direction your fingers need to be going on a handstand to optimize your ability to walk correctly. And for most people, it's like so specific. Like, what is my fingernail doing on my index finger when I'm doing this? And it's like, do I need to know that specific of information? Maybe not, but I bet you're going to pull some things from these conversations that are going to be applicable to your own training. And so it's just cool to be around people at that level that are so in depth and so kind of targeted in on something very really specific.
Yeah, could not agree more. Jordan, I feel like you had something 4 paragraphs ago, and
I just
you're so observant.
Noticed that when you were talking about the aspects of camp that you were really excited about, you didn't mention anything about Dave's handstand station, and so I didn't know.
I didn't get to do it.
And he's like, I'm never fucking doing that one.
No, I didn't get to do it. I need to do that. Like I said, man, I'm a hack these days. I got just like bad habits for days. It's just
Did you do any hand balancing when you were working on her? Is that kind of part of the
a little
curriculum?
bit, but it was very general, like I was just doing general acrobatics at that point. So like I dabbled a little bit. I had this really awesome instructor for a time named Vladimir, and he was like in the 70s. He was like men's pair Moscow champion for 1,000,000 years in a row or whatever. And you see pictures of him in like the classic no shirt,
Sure.
white pants, like, balancing some dude on one hand above him and just jacked out of his mind on the special Soviet program. And
Love it.
And so I got to train with Vladimir for a little bit, and we dabbled, but I was never, like I said, I never really took anything to a real competitive level. I think I get more credit than I'm due in a lot of ways.
Well, it'll be fun to have you out there, and you don't have to take my handstand station. I'll be a little bit upset, but
Oh no, I'll be looking forward to it.
I think it's gonna have to, like, when you check out of camp, if you haven't got that box checked, then you're gonna have to make up for that.
Oh no, I'm in.
All right, beautiful. And even maybe the most important thing for you, and you and your wife have to plan this, is our themed party that we end the week on. Dave,
is the theme released?
It is.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So there is. Okay. So we do have time to plan. All right.
Yeah, you definitely do, Dave.
Yeah. Well, this is our 20th camp, our 10-year anniversary. So we're excited about completing our 10-year, and it's going to be Roaring 20s for our 20th camp. So we're going all out. You can be as fancy or as street rat as you want for Camp 20 for Roaring 20s.
Sweet. Okay. Roaring 20s. I dig it.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Adrian. I'll have you're going to start getting some spam mail from me with different updates for camp, so that you don't feel left behind on any of the info.
Awesome.
Well, Boz, I know this is a crazy week of prep. This is going to be coming out just as we're all getting ready next week. We're excited to be heading out there. Mike and I will be there and be cheering on and supporting in any way that we possibly can. We're excited to see all the new fun things that are going to be thrown at these athletes. We already know what sport you prefer, so we don't got to throw that out there. But any new books and or TV shows that you've come across since our last chat together?
Oh man, to be honest, I haven't been reading much lately. It's definitely kind of fallen off in that regard. So nothing on that front, and not a lot of TV watching going on either. I got a blank on that one. Sorry.
Right,
Sorry to disappoint.
you got a busy schedule for yourself. It was a test. It means you're completely focused on what's going on for next week.
Exactly. Just laser beamed in on the games.
Well, where can people find you? Where do you want people to head to get some more information about what you got going on?
Oh man, I mean, go to the CrossFit Games, watch the CrossFit Games, go to the games.crossfit.com website, and you can see all the viewing information there and what we've got available. It's going to be a good show. I don't have a lot of personal stuff. I got an Instagram account, but I never do anything with it. So people can follow me there if they want, AP Bozman, but it's not a super active account. But yeah, my email is Adrian@CrossFit. If anybody ever wants to reach out, feel free.
Amazing. Mike, anything you want to finish up with?
I mean, I feel like, just to be fully honest with everybody listening, the only reason Adrian came on the episode was I promised him a special jar of vanilla almond butter that is just to die for. So
you make it yourself artisanally in your backyard or something?
No, it was the greatest find. Like last week, Maria and I were out, and it's this one that I think it's one of the reasons why I fell in love with her. She made me an oatmeal one time with this crazy like butter spread stuff on it. It just tastes amazing. And we found it, and I hadn't had it in a long time. So I sent a picture to Adrian, and I'm holding myself accountable to make sure that I remember to bring it to you in Madison. So if there's a random jar of nut butter that gets thrown towards you, just think fast and
Mike, sometimes we have to mute we have to let Jordan know to mute your audio sometimes, so that we don't make our guests feel too uncomfortable.
No, I dig it.
I know when and when not to do it.
I don't think that was an uncomfortable thing to say. It's
not at all uncomfortable. I'm down, and hopefully I catch it. Also, it's true. Enticed onto the show, and what can I say? Every man has a price, right? Isn't that how it's?
Yeah.
Well, boss, thanks again, man. Really appreciate it. It's always great chatting with you. Can't wait to see what fun stuff you got going on for the athletes next week. And hopefully we'll see you out in camp in the fall. For everyone listening, it's going to be September 24th to September 30th. We are sold out. It's going to be a spectacular event. If you are interested in coming to Power Monkey Camp, our 21st camp will be at the end of April 28th to May 4th of 2024, the start of a new year. For everyone else, please be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Please check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Mike Service. On behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with Mike Service. And until next time, thank you all for listening.